The moment that cup slipped from my trembling hands, time froze. Hot coffee splashed across his tailored suit. Dark, steaming, unstoppable. The cafe went silent, as if the entire world held its breath. I remember the slow, measured way he looked up. Eyes sharp, cold as winter glass. The kind of gaze that could ruin someone's day, or their whole career. My heart pounded in my chest, so loud I swore everyone could hear it. And then, instead of anger, he smiled. Just a small, calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of moment you never forget. The kind that doesn't make sense until much later, when you finally realize it wasn't about the coffee at all. But maybe I should start from the beginning. I wasn't anyone special. At least, not in a city like New York, where people wear ambition like designer perfume, and dreams often die before sunrise. My name is Emily Carter, and at the time, I was 28 years old, working double shifts at a downtown cafe that smelled permanently of espresso and tired hopes. Every morning, I tied my hair back, slipped into my slightly faded uniform, and whispered the same quiet promise to myself: just get through today. The cafe wasn't glamorous, but it was my world. Scratched tables, chipped mugs, and all. We opened before dawn for the early commuters, men and women who didn't notice me beyond the cup in my hand. Still, I like to think I mattered in small ways. A smile, a remembered order, a kind word when someone looked like they'd had a rough morning. That was my superpower, noticing people who felt invisible. Maybe because, deep down, I was one of them. I lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat, where the hum of machines sang me to sleep. It wasn't much, a single window, one creaky chair, and a fridge that made more noise than the traffic outside. But it was mine. After losing my parents young and bouncing between relatives, I'd learned that stability, even a fragile one, was something sacred. I didn't dream of riches, just of one day owning a small bakery with my name on the sign. A place where warmth and sugar filled the air, and people came not just for coffee, but comfort. But dreams are expensive, and tips, especially in winter when no one tips, are not enough to build an empire. Still, I tried to believe, because believing was the only luxury I could afford. That morning started like any other. A gray drizzle coating the city, customers in wet coats, and the same playlist humming softly in the background. I'd already served a dozen cappuccinos when I noticed him for the first time. He didn't belong there. Not in our small, worn-out cafe, tucked between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner. He was tall, composed, the kind of man who seemed allergic to chaos. His suit was the kind that made people turn heads, tailored, subtle, expensive without trying. He moved with quiet authority, as if the world adjusted itself around him. He didn't look up when he ordered. His voice was low, firm, businesslike. Black coffee, no sugar. Even his order was precise. I smiled automatically, though he didn't seem to notice. Something about him unsettled me. Not because he was rude, he wasn't, but because he carried an air of distance, like someone who'd built walls so high no one dared to climb them. Still, as I handed him his cup, I caught a glimpse of something. A tiredness behind the control, a shadow in his eyes. I didn't know it then, but that brief flicker of humanity would be the thread that changed everything. I kept seeing him. Every morning, same order, same seat near the window. Always alone. Always reading something on his phone with a quiet intensity. And I against my better judgment, started to look forward to it, to the 30 seconds of small talk, to the rare mornings when his eyes softened and he nodded a quiet thank you. It wasn't a crush, at least not yet. It was curiosity, the dangerous kind that wakes up your heart before your mind can warn you. One Tuesday morning, everything went wrong. The cafe was packed. The new girl called in sick. The espresso machine was acting up. And just when I thought I had things under control, someone bumped into me from behind. The tray tilted, the cup flew, and before I could react, coffee poured straight down the front of his perfect suit. For a second, I forgot to breathe. My hands shook, words tumbling out. Oh my God, didn't even flinch. He simply looked at me as if assessing something invisible. Maybe my panic, maybe my sincerity, and then said quietly, "It's just coffee. Are you all right?" For a moment, I didn't understand. I blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm fine," I stammered. He smiled then, the smallest lift of his lips. "Good, because you look like you're about to faint." And then, the most unexpected thing of all, he took a napkin, gently dabbed his own sleeve, and said, "Accidents happen. Don't worry about it." Before I could apologize again, he left a bill on the counter, far more than the cost of a coffee, and walked out into the rain. That moment replayed in my mind for days. Not the accident, but his reaction, the calmness, the kindness, the mystery behind it. People like him weren't supposed to exist in my world. Not men in tailored suits who treated waitresses with patience instead of pride. And yet, he did. And something in me, something long asleep, began to stir. Back then, I had no idea who he really was. No idea that the man I'd spilled coffee on wasn't just any customer, but one of the most powerful CEOs in the city, or that fate had just opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But I was about to. For the rest of that day, I worked in a haze. Every sound seemed sharper, the clinking of cups, the hiss of steam, the rain tapping the window like nervous fingers. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely, replaying that one impossible moment again and again. His voice, calm but commanding. His smile, faint, unreadable, but oddly gentle. And the way he said, "Are you all right?" as if he truly meant it. Most people barely noticed me. They saw a uniform, not a person. But he'd seen me, even if it was just for a heartbeat. It shouldn't have mattered. He was just a customer, and I was just a waitress who spilled coffee. But there was something about that exchange that felt different, like a ripple moving beneath still water. When I got home that night, my clothes smelled of coffee and exhaustion. I kicked off my shoes and sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur in the rain. The city never slept, but that evening it felt unusually quiet, like it was holding its breath for me. I made myself a cup of tea, though it went cold, untouched. My mind kept circling back to him. Who was he? The suit said money, the composure said power. But the eyes said something else. A kind of loneliness I couldn't quite name. I told myself to forget him, to let it go. Men like that didn't belong in my world. But fate, I've learned, doesn't really care about belonging. 2 mornings later, he came back. I was behind the counter, refilling sugar jars, when I looked up and saw him standing there. Same seat, same calm expression, as if nothing had happened. For a split second, panic shot through me. Should I apologize again? Pretend it never happened? Before I could decide, He caught my eye and offered a small nod. "Good morning," he said. I froze. "Good morning, sir." He smiled faintly. "No need for sir. I'm not your boss." Then, with that same cool tone, "Black coffee, no sugar." It was like a reset, as if the spill had been wiped clean from the slate. And yet, under that simplicity, something new lingered. When I handed him the cup, he said, almost thoughtfully, "You have steady hands today." I laughed nervously, unsure if it was a tease or a test. Trying to avoid more wardrobe disasters, I joked. His lips curved, not into a full smile, but enough to soften the edges of his face. "Well, that's reassuring." Then he turned back to his phone, and that was it. A few words, a few seconds, but for reasons I couldn't explain, they meant everything. Over the next few weeks, he became a quiet constant. Same time each morning, same seat by the window. Sometimes he'd read. Sometimes he'd just stare out at the street, lost in thought. And slowly, almost without realizing it, we began to talk. Not much, just snippets. "How's your morning? Busy day ahead? Rain again, huh?" It wasn't romance. It wasn't friendship. It was something subtler, a fragile connection formed in the cracks of routine. But every now and then, I'd catch him watching me, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but as if he was studying something familiar he couldn't quite remember. And each time I'd feel that strange mix of warmth and fear, because deep down I knew, when people like him notice people like me, it's never simple. One afternoon, after my shift, my coworker Jenna nudged me. "That guy, the one in the window seat, you know who he is, right?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "That's Adrian Cross, CEO of Cross and Holt Industries. Billionaire, real estate empire, tech ventures, the whole deal. He's on the cover of Forbes, Emily." For a moment, her words didn't register. Then it hit me. Billionaire. My stomach turned. I almost dropped the rag in my hand. "That can't be right," I whispered. "He comes here every day, alone. He drinks regular coffee." Jenna laughed. "Well, maybe he likes pretending to be normal. But that's definitely him. Trust me." I Googled. I tried to smile, but inside, my mind was spinning. A billionaire. And I dumped coffee on him. That night, I couldn't sleep. His name echoed in my head, Adrian Cross. I even looked him up myself. There he was, confident, composed, photographed at charity galas and business summits. But the man in those photos wasn't quite the same as the one who sat quietly in my cafe. In those pictures, his smile was perfect, controlled. But in person, it was softer, sadder somehow. And that made me wonder, what kind of man seeks peace in a run-down cafe when he could afford the whole block? The next morning, when he walked in, I saw him differently. Not just as a customer, but as a mystery. "Morning," he said, setting his phone down. I nodded, pouring his coffee. "The usual?" He looked up, and for the first time he hesitated. "No," he said quietly. "Make it with sugar today." I raised an eyebrow. "Sweet tooth suddenly?" He smiled, really smiled this time. "Something like that." When I placed the cup in front of him, our fingers brushed. It was accidental, quick, but it sent a strange electric warmth through me. And when he looked up, something unspoken passed between us. Not flirtation, not yet, but recognition, as if we both knew, without saying a word, that this was the start of something neither of us expected or were ready for. That night, as I walked home under the city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, and maybe a little danger. Because life had always been predictable, safe in its struggles, familiar in its limits. But now, with one spilled cup of coffee, that safety had been cracked open. And part of me, the part that used to dream of more, was ready to see what might come through. The days that followed felt different, charged with an invisible current that made the air around me hum. I'd always thought routine was safety, but suddenly routine had a heartbeat. Adrian Cross came in every morning at precisely 8:15. I'd pretend not to notice the clock tick toward it, but my hands would somehow start to move faster. The machine hissing, milk frothing, my pulse keeping time. He always sat by the window, always with that quiet grace that made chaos seem to still around him. And every so often, he'd glint. But in those seconds, I felt more seen than in entire years of my life. One morning, it was pouring outside, a heavy, relentless rain that blurred the city into watercolors, the kind of day that made people late, cranky, and impatient. But not him. He arrived without an umbrella, his suit damp at the shoulders, water dripping from his hair. He looked more human that day, less untouchable. "Rough morning?" I asked, handing him a towel from behind the counter. He accepted it, laughing softly, a low, warm sound that startled me. "You could say that. Lost a deal I've been working on for 6 months." "Wow," I said, unsure what else to say. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, wiping the rain from his hands. "Don't be. Sometimes things don't go the way you plan." I smiled. "Tell me about it." For the first time, he looked genuinely curious. "You too?" "Every day," I said with a small laugh. "I've planned my life 100 times. It just never seems to follow the script." He tilted his head slightly, as if memorizing the words. "Well," he said quietly, "maybe it's time for a new script." The way he said it, not as advice, but as a reflection, made something inside me shift. That became the rhythm of us. Brief moments, small exchanges, tiny pieces of truth hidden in casual words. I learned he preferred silence to small talk, that he watched people more than he spoke about himself. "What makes you stay?" They weren't flirtatious, they were sincere. And somehow, they made me feel both exposed and safe. "I guess I stay," I told him once, "because I'm scared to leave." He nodded, as if he understood more than I'd said. "Fear keeps us in cages," he murmured, "even ones we've built ourselves." Sometimes, I caught myself wondering what he was doing there, in a cafe so ordinary it barely deserved him. He had money, power, influence, yet he came here, day after day, to a place where no one treated him like a CEO. One day I finally asked, "Why do you come here? You could go anywhere in the city." He looked up from his cup, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I like the coffee." "Liar," I said, before I could stop myself. His brows lifted, amused. "Excuse me?" I laughed, blushing. "Our coffee's terrible, you know that." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Then maybe it's the company." I froze. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he said them, like they meant something. For a moment, the space between us disappeared. Then he cleared his throat, straightened his tie, and returned to his phone, as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had changed. That night, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. Maybe it's the company. Was it just politeness, a joke, or something more? I tried to reason with myself. Men like him didn't fall for women like me. I was a waitress, with dreams bigger than my paycheck. He was a man who probably owned half the skyline. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something real was forming. Something fragile and dangerous. A few evenings later, I was closing up when I heard the door chime. It was already past hours. I sighed, turning, and froze. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in his suit, though this time he looked different, tired, unpolished, like the mask had slipped. "Sorry," he said softly. "I saw the lights on. Didn't mean to intrude." I hesitated, wiping my hands on a towel. "It's okay. I was just cleaning up." He nodded, stepping inside. The rain had left his hair damp again. For a moment, we just stood there, the quiet hum of the espresso machine filling the silence. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Do you ever feel like everyone sees you, but no one really knows you?" The question caught me off guard. I swallowed. "All the time." He exhaled, his gaze distant. "That's my life, every day." There was no arrogance in his voice, just exhaustion. I could see it then, the weight he carried, the loneliness that came with success. And for the first time, I realized we weren't so different. He hid behind money. I hid behind routine. But both of us were just trying to survive the emptiness. We talked for almost an hour that night. About life, about choices, about the things we lose chasing what we think we want. And when he finally stood to leave, he looked at me and said quietly, "You know, Emily, sometimes the people who seem the smallest end up changing everything." Before I could respond, he was gone. The door swung shut, leaving me alone in the soft glow of the cafe lights, his words echoing in my chest. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't know that our worlds were about to collide in ways neither of us could control. That behind that calm smile was a man carrying secrets powerful enough to destroy us both. I only knew that for the first time in years, I was awake, and that something extraordinary had just begun. I used to think love stories began with fireworks, the kind of instant, cinematic magic you see in movies. But real love, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life, disguised as something ordinary. That's how it was with Adrian. One morning bled into the next. Coffee orders turned into conversations, and conversations into connection. It was slow, almost invisible, until one day I realized he wasn't just part of my mornings anymore. He was part of my thoughts. The cafe became our little world, in a city built on chaos and competition. That small space on the corner of 9th and Avery felt like a secret pause. Every morning at 8:15, he'd appear. I'd pretend I hadn't been waiting. And every morning, we'd talk just a little more. He asked about my dreams, not the polite kind of asking people do to fill silence, but like he actually wanted to know. When I told him I wanted to open my own bakery one day, he didn't laugh. He just nodded, as if he could already see the sign over the door. "What would you call it?" he asked once, stirring his coffee. I smiled. "Maybe Hearth, because I want it to feel like home." He looked at me thoughtfully. "That's beautiful. You'd make it work." I blushed. "You don't even know if I can bake." "I can tell," he said simply. "You have the kind of heart that makes things rise." I laughed at the little pun, but his words lingered long after he left. In those days, I started to notice how differently I moved through life. My mornings felt lighter. My reflection in the window didn't. Something inside me was changing, slowly, gently, like the first bloom after a long winter. Still, I tried to keep my distance. He was a CEO, a man with wealth, power, and a world far removed from mine. And I was me, But the heart doesn't understand logic. It only understands rhythm. And somehow, our rhythms had started to match. One evening, just before closing, the door swung open and a group of executives walked in. Sharp suits, clipped voices, the smell of expensive cologne trailing behind them. They filled the cafe with noise, their laughter cold and loud. I looked up from the counter, and there he was among them, Adrian. But he wasn't the man I knew from the mornings. He was colder, harder, his posture straight, his tone brisk. He looked every bit the billionaire, the one who owned skyscrapers, not coffee cups. He barely glanced my way as they placed their orders. And when his assistant, a perfectly dressed woman with sharp eyes, leaned in close to whisper something, my stomach twisted unexpectedly. I turned away, focusing on the register, pretending it didn't sting. Because it shouldn't have. He wasn't mine, and I had no right to want to be noticed. But when he did look over, just briefly, as if by accident, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of apology, or maybe recognition. It was gone in a second. After they left, the silence in the cafe felt too big. Jenna gave me a knowing look. "So that's your morning coffee guy, huh?" I forced a smile. "He's just a customer." She smirked. "Sure, a customer you look at like he hung the moon." I shook my head, trying to laugh it off, but my chest ached with a strange mix of longing and embarrassment. The next day he didn't come, nor the next, or the one after that. By the fourth day, I told myself I was being ridiculous. He had a life, a business. He didn't owe me his presence. But that didn't stop me from looking up every time the door opened, hoping it would be him. It never was. By the end of the week, I told myself it was over, whatever it was. Maybe I'd imagined the whole connection. Maybe it was nothing more than kindness, mistaken for something deeper. I tried to move on, but you can't unfeel something once it's woken your soul. It was Saturday when he finally returned, and morning rush had ended. I was wiping down tables when I heard his voice, quiet, familiar, and completely unexpected. "Are you still serving coffee, or did I miss my chance?" I turned, and there he was. Same calm eyes, same suit, though this time he looked softer. Tired, maybe. For a second, I just stared. Then I managed a shaky smile. "You missed your usual time. I thought you'd found a better cafe." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "There isn't one." Something in his tone made me pause. There was a heaviness beneath the words. He sat down at his usual table, exhaling deeply. "It's been a complicated week." I hesitated before asking, "Work stuff?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "You could say that." Then, more quietly, "Sometimes people think power makes life easier, but it doesn't. It just makes your mistakes more expensive." I didn't know what to say. So I did what I always did. I listened. And for the next 20 minutes, he talked. Not in detail, not names or deals, but in feelings. Frustration, exhaustion, disappointment. It was the first time he'd let his guard down completely. When he finally stopped, he looked up at me and said, "You're easy to talk to, Emily. Most people, they listen to respond. You listen to understand." Something in my chest fluttered. And before I could help it, I said softly, "Maybe you just needed someone who sees you as a person, not a headline." He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes this time. Maybe I did. That afternoon, as he left, he paused at the door. "Do you ever get a lunch break?" he asked. I frowned. "Sometimes." "Why?" He smiled, Because I owe you a coffee. One you don't have to serve. I froze. Are you asking me to have lunch? He said, his voice low, warm. Just lunch. I nodded, heart racing. Okay, I whispered. Just lunch. He smiled once more and walked out. For a moment, I stood there in the quiet cafe, unable to move. Everything felt suspended, like the air itself was waiting for what would happen next. I had no idea that in the end, I settled on something simple: a white blouse, soft jeans, and a small silver necklace my mother once gave me. It wasn't glamour, but it felt like me. I met him at a small Italian place downtown, the kind of restaurant where the owner still greets you at the door and the wine list fits on one handwritten page. When I arrived, he was already there. He stood as I approached, old-fashioned, polite, and smiled in that way that made the world go a little quieter. "Emily," he said, "I'm glad you came." For the first few minutes, we talked like strangers, still pretending they weren't drawn to each other. Work, weather, food, the kind of things people say when they're both nervous for reasons they don't want to admit. But slowly, the tension softened. He told me he used to come here with his father, years ago, before his family's business became everything it is now. He taught me to order the simplest thing on the menu, he said, eyes distant with memory. He said, if a place can make a good pasta, you can trust everything else. I smiled. And can you? He took a bite of his spaghetti and gave a small, approving nod. Still true. Something about that moment, quiet, ordinary, real, made the space between us feel smaller. After lunch, we walked through the park nearby. It was early autumn, the kind of afternoon where sunlight turns everything gold and the wind smells faintly of apples. We talked about music, childhood dreams, and the strange way adulthood never turns out the way we picture it. At one point, I said, "You know, when I was little, I thought success meant having a corner office." He laughed. "And now?" "Now," I said softly, "I think success is waking up in the morning and liking the person you're becoming." He looked at me then, not with admiration, but with something deeper: recognition. We ended up sitting by the pond, watching the ripples shimmer. He told me about the pressures of his position, the constant scrutiny, the loneliness that comes from people seeing only what they want to gain. And then he said something that stayed with me. Everyone thinks power means control, but the truth is, it just means responsibility and fear of losing it. I hesitated before asking, "Is that what you're afraid of? Losing control?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe I'm afraid of never being seen for who I really am." The words hung in the air between us, delicate, honest, unguarded. I wanted to say I saw him, that behind the title and the wealth, there was a man who just wanted to be understood. But I didn't, because saying it would make it real. When we finally said goodbye, he walked me to the subway. At the top of the stairs, he paused. "This was nice," he said. I smiled. It was. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and handed me a small card. "My direct number," he said, "in case you ever want to talk about something that isn't coffee." I laughed. "And if I do want to talk about coffee? Then I guess you'll just have to call and find out." He smiled, turned, and disappeared into the crowd. That night, I sat in bed with the card in my hand, tracing his name with my thumb. I wasn't naive. I knew what it looked like. A billionaire giving his number to a barista. In another world, maybe I would have thought it was just a passing whim. But something about the way he'd looked at me, really looked, told me this was different. And still, I didn't call. Not that night, not the next day, because part of me was scared. Scared of wanting something that could break me. But life has a way of making choices for you when you hesitate too long. 3 days later, the cafe door opened just as the morning rush ended. Adrian walked in, not as the CEO, not even as the polished man from lunch, but looking worn, troubled. His tie was loose, his eyes tired. "Emily," he said quietly, "can I talk to you?" Something in his tone made me nod without hesitation. We stepped outside into the chilly air. He exhaled. "I'm sorry to come here like this. I didn't know who else to talk to." "What happened?" He hesitated. "Someone close to me, a business partner, betrayed me, sold out part of the company to a competitor. And now everyone's looking at me for answers." I didn't know much about his world, but I knew what betrayal felt like. I knew that look in his eyes, that mix of disbelief and exhaustion that comes when trust breaks. So I said the only thing I could. "You don't have to fix everything alone." He gave a small, sad smile. "That's easy to say when the world doesn't expect you to." I reached out hesitantly and touched his hand. Maybe the world doesn't, but I do. For a moment, he just looked at me. And then, quietly, he said, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." He left soon after, but the shift between us was undeniable. Something fragile had deepened into something real. And for the first time, I realized, maybe love doesn't start with grand gestures. Maybe it starts in the quiet, in the moments when someone simply chooses you. That night, I finally sent a message to the number on the card. "If you ever need to talk about coffee, business, or life, my break's at 4. A few minutes later, my phone lit up. "Then I'll be there, 4 sharp." And just like that, something new began. Quietly, gently, but unstoppable. He kept his promise. At exactly 4 o'clock that day, Adrian walked into the cafe. No bodyguards, no briefcase, no pretense. Just him, wearing a dark sweater instead of a suit. He ordered coffee, but he didn't drink it. Instead, he just sat across from me at a corner table, as if trying to remember what normal felt like. For a while, we didn't talk. The silence wasn't awkward. It was fragile, like something that could break if we said the wrong word. Finally, he spoke. "Do you ever feel like your life isn't yours anymore?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "I have everything I once wanted. The company, the respect, the penthouse. But somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell him I understood, but all I could say was, 'Maybe you just need to remember what matters.'" He looked at me then, really looked, and in that moment I felt it, the line between our worlds shifting. After that day, he started showing up more often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to sit quietly near the window while I worked. He'd wait until the last customer left. Then we'd walk through the city streets, the kind that come alive only after midnight, when everything slows down. He told me stories about his travels, about the company he built from the ground up, and about the loneliness that success brings. I told him about my mother, about the tiny apartment I shared with my sister before she moved away, and about how I'd stopped painting years ago because life got too heavy for dreams. He listened, really listened, in a way no one had in years. And somewhere between the laughter and the long pauses, I realized I was falling for him. Not because he was powerful or handsome, but because he saw me. But the world doesn't like when lines blur. One night after closing, my manager pulled me aside. "Emily," he said carefully, "a few of the regulars have been talking about you and that man who keeps coming here." I froze. "What about him?" He sighed. "They think it's inappropriate. You know how people are. They see a man like that and assume things." I felt my cheeks burn. "There's nothing inappropriate about friendship." He gave me a sympathetic look. "Just be careful. The world doesn't give girls like us the benefit of the doubt." That night, as I walked home, the city lights felt colder. I knew he hadn't meant harm. My manager was just trying to protect me. But his words lingered. Girls like us. It echoed in my mind like a curse. Because he was right. People didn't see me the way Adrian did. To them, I was just a waitress, with no right to belong in his world. And maybe, deep down, I believed them. The next evening, Adrian waited for me outside after my shift. When I saw him, my heart lifted, but so did the weight of everything unsaid. We walked without talking until we reached the bridge overlooking the river. The city shimmered below us, distant, untouchable. Finally, I said, "People are starting to talk." He turned to me, puzzled. "About what?" "About us." He frowned. "Let them. It's not that simple," I said softly. "You have a reputation, a company, a life that doesn't fit with mine." He exhaled, frustrated. "Emily, do you really think I care what people say?" I hesitated. "You might not now, but one day you will." He looked away, jaw tightening. For the first time, I saw the CEO in him. A man used to control, to power, to getting his way. "I don't want to lose you because of what other people think," he said quietly. "You won't," I whispered, "unless we start pretending we're something we're not." The air between us grew heavy. He stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "And what if I don't want to pretend anymore?" My heart pounded. Every part of me wanted to say yes to the longing, the risk, the chaos of it all. But fear spoke louder. "Then you'll have to teach me how to live in your world," I said, "because I don't know how." He reached out, brushing his thumb against my cheek. "Maybe we can build a new one." That night, we kissed for the first time. It wasn't like in movies. No rain, no orchestra, no perfect lighting. Just a quiet bridge, city lights flickering below, and two people who didn't belong together, but couldn't walk away. It felt like stepping off a ledge, trusting the fall. And for a moment, I believed we could defy gravity. But life, as I'd soon learn, always collects its debts. Because the next morning, when I arrived at the cafe, a black car was parked outside. Two men in suits stood by the door, his world intruding on mine. And when I saw who was sitting inside, a woman with perfect hair and an expression like polished glass, my heart stopped. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing just slightly before rolling up the tinted window. I didn't know her name then, but soon I would, and she would change everything. For the rest of that morning, I couldn't shake the image of her face behind the tinted glass. Perfect, composed, cold. The kind of woman who never spills her coffee, never second-guesses her reflection, never wonders if she belongs. I tried to focus on my work, but every clang of the espresso machine felt louder than usual. Every passing car made my stomach twist. When Adrian finally came by that afternoon, I wanted to ask, but something in his expression stopped me. He looked guarded, like a man trying to keep too many doors closed. "Rough day?" I asked softly. He smiled, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. You could say that. I handed him his coffee and leaned closer. She was here this morning. He froze. Who? The woman, in the car. He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Her name is Vanessa. The way he said it, careful, weary, made something tighten in my chest. She's my business partner, he said finally. We've known each other for years. She runs part of the investment division. Does she always visit your favorite coffee shop in a black car with bodyguards? A faint smirk tugged at his lips. No, she must have had a reason. Like? He met my gaze. Making sure. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my mind, sharp and uneasy, making sure I remember where I belong. Something told me Vanessa wasn't just a business partner. She was the gatekeeper of his world, the one who knew every rule, every boundary, every price for crossing them. And I was already trespassing. The following days blurred together. Adrian grew busier. The late-night walks stopped. The texts became shorter, more delayed. Every time the cafe door opened, I'd glance up, hoping it was him. Sometimes it was. Most times it wasn't. But when he did come, it was like the world tilted back into place, if only for a little while. One evening, just as I was closing, he appeared, pale, exhausted, with tension carved into his face. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. We walked to the park, the same bench by the pond where we'd first talked for hours. He sat down, head in his hands. Vanessa found out, he said. My stomach dropped. Found out what? About us. He leaned back, looking at the dark water. She saw the reports. My driver mentioned you, and now she's threatening to bring it up to the board, to question my judgment, my focus. I swallowed. Because of me? Because they think a man in my position shouldn't get distracted. There it was, the word I hated most. As if love was something messy and unprofessional. As if I was something temporary, unworthy of being real. What are you going to do? I asked. He looked at me, and the pain in his eyes said everything. I told her to stay out of my personal life, but Emily, he paused. She's not just any partner. She's part of the family that owns half the company. My chest tightened. Family? She's my late father's goddaughter. She was practically raised to be part of this world, and she's always believed I should have been with her. The words hung in the air like poison. She wants you gone, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. We sat there for a long time, the silence stretching between us, heavy with everything neither of us could change. Finally, I whispered, maybe she's right. He turned sharply. Don't say that. Adrian, look at us. I make lattes. You sign million-dollar contracts. People like Vanessa, they're not going to let this happen. He reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. I don't care what they think. I'm not giving you up. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But somewhere deep down, I felt the storm building. Quiet, certain, unstoppable. A few days later, everything came crashing down. It was a Thursday morning when the call came. My manager's voice was shaking when he said, Emily, we need to talk. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake at work. But when I walked into his office, two men in suits were already there. They weren't customers. They were corporate. One of them handed me an envelope. Miss Carter, as of today, your employment here is terminated. I froze. Terminated? For what? The man looked uncomfortable. The cafe's ownership has changed. The new investors are restructuring. Your position has been dissolved. I stared at him. New investors? He nodded. A company under the Harrington Group. Adrian's company. The room started spinning. I didn't need anyone to tell me who had arranged it. It wasn't Adrian. It was Vanessa. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by silence. No job, no message from him. Just the steady hum of the city outside, indifferent to my heartbreak. I wanted to call him, to scream, to ask why he hadn't protected me. But I couldn't, because I already knew the answer. Some battles are fought in boardrooms, not hearts. And I was the casualty of both. The next morning, a knock echoed through my apartment. I hesitated, heart pounding, before opening the door. It was him. Adrian. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Emily, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Vanessa went behind my back. When I found out, Stop, I said softly. It doesn't matter. It does, he said. I'm going to fix this. How? I whispered. By firing her? By risking your company? Adrian, she owns half of it. You said it yourself. He reached for me, desperation in his eyes. Then I'll give it all up. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. No, you won't. And even if you did, I wouldn't let you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He took a step closer, voice breaking. I can't lose you. I met his gaze, and for the first time, I didn't see the CEO. I saw the man who just wanted to be free. But freedom, I realized, has a price neither of us was ready to pay. So I did the only thing I could. I whispered, then maybe you have to lose me to find yourself. And before he could say anything more, I closed the door. On one side, the man I loved. On the other, the silence I thought I'd escape forever. But sometimes, letting go is only the beginning of the story. Because as I'd soon learn, the world wasn't done testing us yet. The days after that night felt like walking through fog. I went to work, but the cafe no longer felt like mine. Every customer, every clatter of dishes reminded me of absence. Him, and the life I had almost imagined. I avoided my phone. I avoided the street corners where we had walked. I avoided thinking about what could have been, and yet I couldn't avoid him, because Adrian had refused to disappear. It started with small messages. Are you okay? I'm sorry. Call me when you're ready. Each one tore at my heart, and I didn't know whether to be angry or relieved. Then one rainy evening, I got a longer message. Emily, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't undo what Vanessa did, but I swear I'm going to make this right. I need you to trust me. I stared at the screen. My chest ached. Trust him? After everything? But part of me wanted to. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was closing the cafe alone when a commotion erupted outside. A sleek black car skidded into the curb. Vanessa stepped out, flanked by two men. Her eyes locked on me, cold and sharp. Emily Carter, she said, her voice like ice. We need to talk. I froze. This was it, the collision of our worlds. She walked inside, surveying the cafe as if it were her territory. I understand you have a relationship with Adrian Cross, she said, eyes piercing. You may not realize what you're interfering with. He has responsibilities, loyalties, and you're in the way. I bristled. I'm not in anyone's way. I don't want his company, his money, or anything else. Her smile was thin. But you do want him, and desire makes people dangerous. Dangerous. I felt her words like a blade pressing against my chest. That evening, Adrian finally came by. His expression darkened the moment he saw Vanessa leave. "She went inside?" I asked. "Nervous." He nodded, jaw tight. "She's trying to intimidate you." I laughed bitterly. "That's not necessary. I already feel small enough." He reached for my hand, gripping it firmly. "You're not small, Emily. Not to me. But she's powerful, and she won't stop." I swallowed hard. "Then maybe we shouldn't see each other for a while. Until this blows over." His hand faltered, but he nodded. "You think I could survive without you? Without us?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The next week was hell. Vanessa orchestrated meetings, public appearances, and manipulations that left me questioning every interaction with Adrian. Rumors spread, subtle, careful, damaging. Suddenly, I felt like an intruder in his life, his world, and my own. One night, alone in my apartment, I whispered to the empty room. Was it ever real? Or just a story I told myself to feel alive? Then, the breaking point arrived. Adrian called me late, voice strained, almost desperate. "Emily, I can't do this anymore." "What?" I whispered, fear stabbing my heart. "The pressure, Vanessa, everything. I can't protect you. And I don't want you hurt because of me." Tears blurred my vision. "So that's it?" He paused. "I love you. But right now, love isn't enough." The line went dead. And suddenly, the world felt empty. The warmth we had built, the quiet afternoons, the stolen moments, all gone. I realized then, love can be fragile, but heartbreak is merciless. The next morning, I walked into the cafe. Numb. Everything looked the same. The espresso machine, the worn counter, the faint scent of roasted coffee. But I felt like a ghost in my own life. Jenna gave me a sympathetic look. "He called?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, he's gone." The morning after Adrian's call, the cafe felt unbearably quiet. I went through the motions, grinding beans, steaming milk, wiping counters, but it was all mechanical, like moving through fog. My hands trembled slightly, and I caught myself staring at the door every few seconds, half expecting him to walk in and fix everything. He didn't. I had convinced myself that our love story had ended, that our stolen moments, the shared laughter, and even the quiet confessions were now nothing more than memories to haunt me. A week later, the truth hit like a lightning strike. I had just finished a late shift when a limousine pulled up outside the cafe. I watched as Adrian stepped out, looking more exhausted and tense than ever. Behind him, Vanessa stood with a group of lawyers, her expression icy, unyielding. My heart pounded. He walked in, without a word, eyes searching mine, desperate and pleading. "Emily," he said softly, "I need to tell you everything." I swallowed hard. "I don't think I want to hear it." "You do," he insisted, "because if you knew, you'd understand why I couldn't protect you before." We sat in the corner booth, the dim cafe lights casting shadows across his face. "Vanessa," he began, "she's not just a business partner. She's family. My father's goddaughter, raised to think she was entitled to my life. And when she found out about us, she didn't hesitate." I felt my chest tighten. "She threatened you?" He nodded. "She manipulated the board, twisted my words, made it look like you were a distraction, someone who could compromise the company. I tried to fight it, Emily. I really did. But she's relentless." Tears pricked my eyes. "So all of this, losing my job, was because of her?" "Yes." His hand trembled slightly as he reached across the table. And I hated that I couldn't stop it. I sat back, trying to breathe. The injustice of it, the way our love had been punished for no fault of our own, left me raw. "You didn't tell me because you didn't want me hurt," I said softly. He swallowed. "Exactly. I couldn't risk you getting caught in a war you didn't ask for. I should have fought harder, Emily. I should have told her to her face that my heart isn't hers to control." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to forgive him. But every fiber of me trembled at the thought of the world he belonged to, a world that could crush us without a second thought. That night, Adrian didn't leave. He stayed, pacing the cafe after closing, talking through every decision, every mistake, every impossible choice. "I can't let her win," he whispered, almost to himself. "Not you, not us." I wanted to reach for him, to say the words my heart screamed. "I believe in us. I trust you." But fear gripped my throat. Could love survive a battlefield I couldn't even see? The following days blurred into chaos. Emails, phone calls, meetings, all orchestrated by Vanessa, tried to suffocate us. I could see the toll it was taking on him, and in turn, it tore at me. One evening, I finally broke down. Alone in my apartment, I sank to the floor, cradling my knees, whispering, "Why does love have to hurt this much?" My phone buzzed. It was him. "I can't lose you, Emily. Not now, not ever. Meet me." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to run, to protect my fragile heart. But something inside me, stubborn, desperate, alive, whispered, "Go." We met at a quiet park, the same bench by the pond that had witnessed our first truths. He arrived, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging to him like the storm itself. And when he looked at me, eyes burning with a mix of love and desperation, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I couldn't imagine a life without him. "I've tried," he said, voice breaking. "I've tried to fix everything, to make the world safe for you. But the truth is, we can't wait for the world to change. We have to decide what we're willing to fight for, together." I reached for his hand, trembling. "Then, let's fight." But the world wasn't done testing us. Vanessa was no longer a distant threat. She began appearing where we least expected her, at meetings, in the lobby, even watching from the sidewalk. Every time she appeared, the air thickened with tension. One night, Adrian confided in me something that made my stomach churn. "She knows about us, and she's willing to ruin everything, my career, my reputation, even you, to make sure I stay in line." I shivered. I wasn't just fighting for love anymore. I was fighting to survive the storm her jealousy had unleashed. And then came the revelation that shook everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. He looked at me one rainy evening, standing outside the cafe. "Emily, there's something I haven't told you. Something that could change everything." My heart stopped. He nodded. "Not just danger, exposure, scandal, the kind that could destroy both our lives." The world I thought I had glimpsed through our quiet moments was gone. In its place stood a labyrinth of power, deceit, and betrayal, and we were trapped in the center of it. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness that refused to lift. Every message, every call, every shadow of Adrian's world pressed against my chest. I knew Vanessa would strike again, and deep down, I knew she wouldn't stop until she had proven her control. I had no idea how Adrian would survive it, or if we could survive it together. It started subtly. The cafe phone rang endlessly, but when I picked up, silence greeted me. Anonymous threats arrived in emails, suggesting that staying close to Adrian was dangerous. For me, for him, for everything I held dear. And yet, through it all, Adrian showed up at the cafe every morning. His presence was a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest chaos, someone was fighting for us. But the fear was infectious. I caught myself flinching whenever a black car rolled past the window, or when a sharp-suited stranger lingered too long on the street corner. Then came the confrontation. One rainy afternoon, Vanessa appeared at the cafe. No entourage this time, just her, confident, controlled, and radiating authority. She walked straight to my counter, eyes fixed on mine. "Emily Carter," she said, her voice smooth, dangerous. "You need to understand your place." I bristled. "I don't have a place in your world, and I don't want one. Stay away from me. Stay away from him." She laughed, low and chilling. "Do you really think it's that simple? Adrian isn't yours, and neither is your little rebellion. People like us, we always win." I clenched my fists, refusing to let her see how scared I was. "You don't get to decide who I care about." She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Care? Oh dear, Emily. Care doesn't matter here. Power does." Just then, Adrian stepped inside, soaked from the rain, his face a storm of determination and fury. "Vanessa," he said, voice low and controlled. "Leave." Her smile widened. "Or what? You'll tell me again that you love her?" "I'll do whatever it takes to protect her," he said, stepping closer to me, "even if it means defying you." She laughed again, sharper this time. "You're naive. You think love can protect you from this world." He turned to me, gripping my hands tightly. "Emily, I can't lose you. Not to her, not to anyone. But you have to trust me." I looked at him, heart hammering. Could I trust him, the man I loved, the man caught in a labyrinth of lies and power? I nodded slowly. "I do." The storm outside matched the tension inside. Rain pounded the windows as we stood there, two hearts defying everything around us. Vanessa's eyes flicked between us, calculating, furious. "You'll regret this," she hissed, before storming out, leaving a silence that felt louder than any shout. That night, Adrian and I finally let ourselves breathe. We sat in the cafe after closing, the smell of coffee lingering like a comfort blanket. "I've never felt this exposed," he admitted, voice breaking. "I've built a world of control and precision, but with you, everything is unpredictable." I traced my finger along the rim of my cup. "That's love, Adrian. Unpredictable, messy, beautiful." He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "And dangerous," he added quietly. "Yes," I whispered, "but worth it." Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Adrian had to attend high-stakes meetings with Vanessa and the board, while I faced whispered rumors and judgmental glances at the cafe. The world pressed in on all sides, and yet, through every challenge, we found moments, fleeting, fragile, where love reminded us why it was worth the fight. One evening, after another grueling day, Adrian pulled me aside in a quiet alley near the cafe. "I'm done hiding," he said, voice fierce. "I won't let her or anyone dictate who we are. I'll face the consequences. I'll risk everything for you." I felt tears prick my eyes. The man I loved, the one who could command armies in boardrooms, was willing to lay it all down for me. And I realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, this was no longer just about coffee dates and quiet moments. It was about choosing courage over fear, love over safety, truth over comfort. That night, we embraced in the cafe, the world outside muted by rain and darkness. I felt the weight of our battles, the pressure of power and jealousy, but also the undeniable pull of our hearts. Somewhere in that embrace, I understood. Love doesn't protect you from storms. It gives you the strength to weather them together. And for the first time since Vanessa appeared, I believed we could. The next morning, the cafe felt alive again, but not because the rush had returned. It was alive because Adrian walked in, not as a CEO, not as a powerful figure, but as himself. He wore a simple sweater, his hair messy, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights, but burning with resolve. I watched him approach the counter. "Good morning," he said softly. "I think it's time we stop hiding." I blinked. "Hiding?" He nodded. "From Vanessa, from the world, from ourselves. We can't keep pretending this is small, harmless, fleeting." Over the next week, he began taking steps to reclaim control. Not through power plays or threats, but with honesty, transparency, and courage. He faced Vanessa in a board meeting, confronting her coldly, yet firmly. "I'm done letting fear and manipulation dictate my life," he said. "I care about Emily. That is not negotiable. And if anyone thinks otherwise, they can step aside." Word spread quickly through the company. Some were shocked, others whispered, curious about the young woman he risked so much for. And for the first time, I saw the ripple effect of courage, how one act of love could challenge an entire world. But it wasn't just him who had to fight. I had to fight too. I had to reclaim my confidence, my sense of self, and my belief that I deserved to belong in a world so different from mine. Every whispered rumor, every judgmental glance, every doubt I'd held about myself became fuel for change. I worked longer hours, not just to survive, but to thrive. I painted again, creating canvases that reflected the tumult of love and fear, of hope and despair. And each painting, each brushstroke, reminded me I was stronger than I had believed. Adrian and I began sharing moments again, quiet, stolen, precious. We walked in the city streets at night, hand in hand, sharing laughter that felt like rebellion. We cooked meals together in my small apartment, spilling sauce and wine and worries alike, finding joy in imperfection. It wasn't easy. Every day was a negotiation with fear, a test of faith, a challenge to love against the odds. But slowly, the storm began to abate. Then came the day of our reckoning. Vanessa appeared one last time. Not at the cafe, not at a board meeting, but in a private office, alone with Adrian. I waited outside, heart hammering, unsure if I wanted to intervene or stay hidden. Adrian emerged 20 minutes later, face pale but resolute. "She's gone," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "She finally understood. She can't control me, and she can't control us. And if she tries, we'll be ready." I exhaled, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying lifting from my shoulders. Freedom wasn't just his anymore. It was ours. That evening, we returned to the cafe, our sanctuary, our starting point. He held my hand, looking into my eyes with that same quiet intensity that had drawn me to him months ago. "Emily," he said, voice low, tender, unwavering, "I don't care about the world, the money, or anything else. I just care about you, about us." Tears blurred my vision. "I care about you too," I whispered, "and I trust us, enough to keep fighting together." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "I promise, no more hiding, no more fear, only us." For the first time in months, I felt peace. The chaos, the power struggles, the jealousy, it no longer ruled our lives. We had faced the storm, and while it had left its scars, it had also shown us what mattered most. Love that is brave, honest, and unwavering. And in that quiet, after the storm, I realized the truth. Love isn't about escaping the world. It's about the first morning after Vanessa finally backed down. The city felt different. The air was lighter, the sunlight sharper, as if the world itself was celebrating a quiet victory. I walked to the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. Each step felt deliberate, each breath a reminder that I had survived the storm, not unscathed, but unbroken. Adrian arrived shortly after opening, his usual calm replaced with a tender excitement. "Good morning," he said, eyes locking on mine. "Ready to start over?" I smiled, a warmth spreading from my chest. "Yes, but this time on our terms." Over the next weeks, we settled into a rhythm that felt real. Not perfect, not cinematic, but ours. We cooked together in my small kitchen, laughing when sauce splattered on the counters. We explored the city streets hand in hand, finding little corners of magic in mundane places. A street musician's song, a bakery with the best cinnamon rolls, a quiet park bench where no one else came. I returned to painting, this time for joy, not escape. Each canvas captured fragments of our journey: fear, hope, heartbreak, and the courage it took to love fully. Adrian supported me quietly, not as a CEO trying to control, but as a partner willing to stand beside me in every vulnerability. The cafe became our sanctuary again, a bridge between our two worlds. Customers whispered about the romance they noticed, and I realized it didn't matter. Our love wasn't for show. It was private, precious, and resilient, forged in storms that would have broken anyone else. Even Vanessa's presence in the city no longer mattered. Her shadow had lost its power the moment we claimed our truth. One evening, after closing, Adrian and I sat by the river, the same river where we'd first confronted fear, where we'd first held hope. He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. "I know this wasn't easy," he said softly, "and the world will always test us. But I want you to know, no matter what happens, you're my choice, always." Tears pricked my eyes. "And you're mine, even in the chaos, even when it's scary." We sat there, the city lights dancing on the water, listening to the gentle lapping of waves. In that moment, I understood that life wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about finding someone who makes you brave enough to face them. Weeks turned into months. Adrian and I continued building our lives, a delicate balance between his world and mine. I returned to my small dreams, painting, writing, living with intention. He navigated his responsibilities with a renewed clarity, no longer letting fear or obligation dictate his heart. And every morning, when I poured the first cup of coffee and he walked in with that quiet smile, I was reminded, love isn't about wealth or status. It's about courage, trust, and choosing each other every single day. Looking back, I realized the storm wasn't punishment, it was a lesson. It taught me that kindness can coexist with strength. That humility doesn't mean weakness. That love, when it's real, demands risk, but rewards you in ways you never imagined. Adrian and I didn't just survive our trials, we grew because of them. And as I sit now, writing this story, I smile, because I know life will always bring challenges. There will be people like Vanessa, obstacles too large to predict, moments that test the very fabric of love. But there's also a truth I carry with me forever. When two hearts are willing to fight together, no storm can break them. And that is a love worth every risk. Months passed, and our lives slowly fell into a rhythm that felt both extraordinary and ordinary. Extraordinary because we had faced storms that could have torn us apart. Ordinary because love is built not only on grand gestures, but on coffee mornings, shared laughter, and quiet evenings together. I often caught myself smiling at small things. The way Adrian's eyes lit up when he saw something that excited him. The way he held my hand a little tighter when I felt unsure. The way our worlds collided in simple, perfect harmony. I also learned to trust myself. For so long I questioned my worth, whether a girl from a small cafe could ever matter in the life of a man like Adrian. But the truth became undeniable. It wasn't about wealth, status, or appearances. It was about authenticity, being unapologetically ourselves. I had survived the fear, the judgment, and the heartbreak. I had emerged stronger, more confident, and ready to embrace love with open eyes, not blind hope. Adrian grew too. The man who once measured every move in power plays and strategic decisions now measured them in love and loyalty. He no longer feared judgment or whispers behind closed doors. He learned that protecting someone didn't mean controlling them. It meant standing beside them, even when the world seemed intent on tearing you apart. Together, we had learned a fundamental truth. Love is not a passive feeling. It is active, deliberate, and sometimes it requires courage that surprises even the strongest of hearts. Our friends noticed the change. Jenna often said, "I've never seen you both so alive." And it was true. Alive, not because life had become easy, but because we had chosen each other through the chaos. Even the cafe became a symbol of our journey. It wasn't just where we met or where our story began. It was where we learned to fight for love, to navigate fear, and to celebrate small victories. Looking back, I realized the storms were never obstacles to keep us apart. They were mirrors reflecting what truly mattered: courage, trust, and the willingness to risk your heart fully. Adrian and I didn't just fall in love, we grew into love. We discovered strength we didn't know we had. We learned that life's challenges are not punishments. They are invitations to rise together. And so here we are, not perfect, not free from fear, but unshakably committed to each other. I pour the first cup of coffee every morning, and he walks in with that quiet smile. We laugh, we talk, we hold each other through small storms and occasional misunderstandings. We live fully, not just in love, but in truth. Because the ultimate lesson of our journey is simple. Love is not just about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who makes you brave enough to be yourself. And when you have that, every storm becomes a story you can survive. The weeks that followed were calm, but filled with purpose. Adrian and I began blending our worlds more deliberately. I met colleagues he trusted. He met friends who knew my heart. And together, we built a life that honored both our pasts. The cafe remained my sanctuary, a reminder of beginnings, of courage, and of the simple joys that had brought us together. I painted more, laughed more, and allowed myself to dream again, not of fairy tales, but of realities we could create together. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Adrian and I sat on the rooftop of my apartment building, wrapped in blankets. The air smelled of rain-soaked asphalt and distant flowers. I traced my fingers over the lines of his hand and said softly, "Do you remember the first time I spilled coffee on you?" He chuckled, shaking his head. How could I forget? The worst mistake of my life and the best. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. That day changed everything. I didn't know it then, but spilling that coffee was the start of our story. He turned to me, eyes glistening with emotion. It did, and it taught me more than anything I've ever learned in a boardroom. About love, trust, and courage. About fighting for what truly matters. I nodded, heart full. It taught me the same. That even in the chaos, love can survive. If we dare to protect it, nurture it, and never let fear win. For a long moment, we simply sat there, letting the city hum beneath us, absorbing the quiet satisfaction of survival and triumph. Weeks turned into months, and our love solidified in ways I had never imagined. Adrian no longer avoided showing affection, and I no longer hesitated to stand beside him openly. Together, we navigated challenges, celebrated victories, and cherished ordinary days like extraordinary gifts. I realized something profound. Life does not protect the heart, and it does not give love without tests. But it rewards those willing to be vulnerable, to fight for what matters, and to trust in each other even when the world seems against them. Love is messy. Love is hard. Love demands risk. But when it is real, it endures. Now, when I walk through the cafe, I see more than a place of work. I see the first spark, the trials, the heartbreak, and the triumph. I see a life transformed, not by wealth, power, or circumstance, but by courage, trust, and unwavering commitment. And when Adrian walks in with that quiet, confident smile, I know we survived the storm, we grew through the chaos, and we built something unbreakable. So if there is one lesson to take from our story, it is this. The heart may tremble, the world may challenge, and life may test you in ways you cannot predict. But love, the kind that asks for courage, trust, and honesty, is always worth fighting for. Because when you fight together, you don't just survive, you thrive. And you discover a love stronger than fear, more enduring than obstacles, and more transformative than you ever imagined.